Hey guys, hope you're doing well. I wanted to do a quick video on my life, and I wanted to talk about whether or not film school is worth it. There are plenty of videos out there asking this question: is film school worth it? I know because I'm going to film school, and when I was applying to film school, I binged the shit out of Reddit, binged the shit out of YouTube, tried to find every single fucking video I could, and try to figure out is film school worth it or not. Bear in mind, I'm in my first year of film school. I did this video, and I'm 1 year in, and I'm thinking of doing one when I finish film school. I'm going to talk about my experience so far. Hopefully it's helpful to you at home who's trying to get into film school. So just a bit about myself before I jump right into whether or not it's worth it. So my story is, I've always wanted to do film. Like, film was my shit. I loved film sets. I liked the way they look. They always looked really neat to me. I'm a big film buff. I've always liked entertainment in general. Look at this. I'm wearing a fucking Super Dave Osborne shirt, for Christ's sake. I've always really liked film, and I always wanted to pursue it. But in my life, I was pressured by my peers and by my family to maybe go down a safer route, which I did, and I ended up hating. I did pharmacy. Was not for me. Graduated with my PharmD, so I have a Doctor of Pharmacy degree. Didn't like it. I hated a pharmacy. I hated dealing with customers. But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of my story. I did that. I used to live in America. Moved back to Canada, where I'm originally from. Well, not really where I was originally from. I was born in Quebec. Moved to Ontario. So now I'm in Ontario. So that's everything leading up to my decision whether or not to go to film school or not. I'm 25 years old. At the time of applying, I was 24. I knew that if I was pursuing film school, I'd be surrounded by people a little younger than me. But to be honest, they're not quite younger than me. I'd say I'm a little more than the medium age. I'd say like 22 is probably the average age, 20 to 22. So I'm 24 or 25 now, but when I first got into film school, I was 24. I'm going to give you all the pros and I'm going to give you all the cons with film school, and then maybe you can kind of judge for yourself whether or not it's for you, because it is for some and it is for others. And I also don't think that the situation is as black and white as what people like it to be. One very, very key thing to keep in mind, though: film school in America is a ripoff. This is more of a Canadian kind of YouTube channel, I guess, but I'm talking more for my Canadian friends. Canada film school, for the most part, unless you go to a private film school like Vancouver or Toronto Film School, for the most part, film school in Canada is relatively cheap. My tuition is 1.5K a semester, so it's not that much. And maybe costs should factor into whether you go to film school or not, if you can't afford that. But I will say, like, in America, you're very pressured to take out student loans to go to film school, whereas Canada, they give a lot of opportunities, like scholarships and the loans without interest. Whereas in America, the amount of money you're going to spend is so huge, you have no choice but to take out a private loan sometimes, and those can become like 8, 9, 10%. Keep in mind, if you're going to pursue film school in America, this is a very different factor to put in. Paying 1.5K a semester versus a lot of money is a completely different story. So Canada and America is a kind of different game there. Nonetheless, I'm going to tell you what the pros are and what the cons are. For a pro, cost efficiency. 1.5K a semester, I think, is a very reasonable price for education. There's a lot of programs out there that are very expensive, and what you get with a film program can be very cost effective. Just when you look at equipment alone, if you want Adobe After Effects, Adobe Premiere, video equipment, recording equipment, sound equipment, rooms in order to film something, studios, access to learning. I feel like 1.5K a semester is not that out of control. And the film schools I looked at in Toronto ranged from 1.5K. I went with the cheaper one of the options that I saw, and then it was like maybe upwards of a couple thousand a semester. For what you get, I think the price if you can afford it, I feel like price-wise, it's not too out of the ordinary. If you're paying upwards of a couple thousand, then it becomes a bit more of a debate. Here's another pro, and I kind of touched upon it. Access to equipment. And this kind of goes into the cost efficiency thing I did in my head when I was applying to universities and to film schools, is if you're going to rent out equipment, you're going to be looking at a lot of money. And the only way you can learn is to really get your hands onto the equipment. It's very costly versus if you go to school, you get that for free. You can just rent it sometimes, and we'll get into that. So the access to equipment is a really good thing about going to film school. Sometimes the weekend, I'd have nothing planned. I wouldn't have work. What would I do? I'd go to the rental place, rent out the camera, fuck around with it. Fucking film some shit, you know? See what happens. Expect the unexpected. It's really fun. And there are kind of resources in the Toronto area that I'm aware of that offer that opportunity. There's something called Lift Toronto, which is like this, it stands for Liaison of Independent Filmmakers of Toronto, and you can pay a yearly fee of approximately, I'd say $150 if you're a student. If you pay that yearly fee, you get access to equipment, but you have to pay to rent the equipment. When you bundle in the education and the access to equipment, it could be very worth it going to film school in that regard. Just stuff like Adobe can cost you an arm and a leg. Again, renting a camera out for a day. And you don't want to rent a camera out for a day because either you're shooting a project that's going to take several days, or you just need to practice and you're not going to learn everything in one day. So it really is sort of worth it depending on the price of your university, just because of that access to equipment. One other thing too is I don't have an especially powerful computer, and whenever I want to edit a YouTube video, I can use the school's computer. I'm not that far away from the school. I just drive to school, use their computer, drive back. So even access to computers, that can be worth it for some who don't have access to a super powerful computer or don't have access to really good Wi-Fi and need to do a very heavy project. Here's something to keep in mind. Some schools will require you to pay for the equipment. The school I go to, and I'm not going to disclose the school because I'm going to say my opinion on stuff, and I don't want the school to feel like I'm dissing them. It's more of a general thing, if anything. But anyway, some schools will require you to pay in order to rent equipment. My school doesn't do that, and there's a lot of schools that actually don't do that. So it depends on the school. So do some research, look into it, see which schools do that, which schools don't do that, because I think that's a very neat thing that a school can just allow you to rent it out for free. Now, there are some caveats. It's not like you can rent it anytime. There are periods of time where there's an assignment coming up and everyone wants to rent out the camera to fucking do the assignment at the last minute. So it's not like you get access to the camera anytime you want, but my school is actually pretty good when it comes to access to equipment, reasonably within when I want. Here's a pro/con: meeting people. Depending on who you are, that's a good thing or a bad thing. And like I said, I lived in a small town in America prior to moving to Toronto, and I really got a huge culture shock because living in Bangor, Maine is so fucking different from living in Toronto. And that's why I kind of put this in the pro/con territory. And you get good and you get bad. You get your typical wannabe Tarantinos, auteurs, talk about movies all the time. You get those crowds. I've seen a lot of people actually that are kind of just not into film that much, and they're just oh, my parents told me to get a degree and I figured I'd go to film. You get those kinds of people, which I don't understand what the fuck you're doing with your life. But then you get some people that are on the same wavelength as you, have similar interests. If you want to film a project, you don't mind hitting them up and asking hey, can I borrow this thing that you have? Or hey, I want to go shoot this thing. You mind holding the boom microphone for me as I shoot this thing? Sometimes you'll meet those people that are willing to do that. You also get a lot, and like I said, I'm 25 and I'm surrounded by 20-year-olds, which it doesn't sound like a big age gap, but to me it is. You get that, what I call urban brain rot. It's when you stay in the city too long, smog goes up your nostrils, rots your brain a little bit, and you don't know what the fuck is going on. During class, someone said, I hate Scorsese. Based take. I love Scorsese. It's not really that based, but it is an outrageous claim to say that you don't like one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. But I was like, you know what? Kid's 19. Kid's probably hasn't seen that many Scorsese flicks. You know, maybe they started with The Aviator, not a good one to start with. So I was like, hey, which one did you start with? Like, did you see Goodfellas, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver? And they just said, oh, I've never seen any of his movies. I just don't like white people. I wish I was making this story up. That's an actual thing that happened to me. So you get a lot of, like, dumb comments like that. You're surrounded by 19-year-old, like, theater geeks that think they know the world. You kind of have to accept that. And like I said, film school is good for meeting people, but you just get such a fucking crapshoot of random people. It's really like going on Reddit. You can get like a really smart person or you can get a really dumb person. Again, like the amount of dumb things I've heard, but I have like, I'd say a handful of friends, maybe 6, that I feel comfortable talking to. If I have a project, I can hit them up. They're really cool people. That said, I do work on film sets as well while going to school, and I kind of do both. Would I say that I've met more people on film sets or at school? I'd say I met a lot more people on film sets. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because when I work on film sets, I usually work in Quebec. It's people that are more, that kind of have more of my sensibilities, a bit older folk, versus when I'm in school, it's younger folks, urban very much, lives in Toronto. So I'm kind of outside of the norm when it comes to Toronto versus in Quebec, where it's more of my homeland. I know how to navigate myself better. So take that with a grain of salt. But again, film school can be a good way to meet people. Big pro about film school. Learning the basics. Speaking of dumb things people say, there's nothing I hate more than when I watch a YouTube video and a director is like, you want to learn film? Pick up one of these, and shoot a movie. There's nothing I hate more than that. Because you're not getting feedback, you're not getting criticism. There's more to film than just pointing a camera in a direction. There's how to direct actors, how to light a scene, how to block a scene, how to do art direction, how to do cinematography, what is motivated camera movement, what is 3-point lighting, what is the 180-degree rule. And I get that you want hands-on experience in order to make those mistakes and learn from those mistakes, but if you don't have a mentor that's kind of guiding you and telling you this is the mistakes you did, you're going to be firing a lot of videos at nothing. Not only that, but even if you have an amazing story, but you don't have that basic understanding of how lighting, acting, cinematography, sound, oh my god, sound, if you don't know how that works, and you just throw that onto YouTube and cross your fingers and hope it's successful, I'm sorry, 1 second goes by in the movie and no one gives a shit. They'll click somewhere else. People's attention spans now are so fucking dull because of TikTok. You can't help it. You have to find a way to bring what's in your brain to life, and there's no better way than learning the basics that they teach you in film school. Like I said, they teach you so much about the basics of editing, so much about the basics of cinematography. What's a T-stop? What is aperture? What is shutter speed? When do I change the shutter speed? Here's like a very good example of something I've learned in film school that I applied. I did a short film, and here's like something that's like really film nerdy, but I'm going to try to explain it. Sometimes the wavelength of a light fucks up with the wavelength of a camera. So when you have like a scene where there's a light, like a neon light, it'll look like it's flashing like this, and it'll be really distracting. And the way to fix that is to change the shutter speed. That is something I would have never known unless I went to film school. Flat out. It doesn't matter how many hours you do on set, unless you're in the cinematography department, but I feel like film school gives you a broad understanding of everything and how everything works. And a lot of people are going to be like, you can go on YouTube and learn that. That's cool and all, but it's not the same as school. Looking at YouTube videos is not the same as going to school. You don't get that stepwise process. I feel like videos on YouTube, you can kind of, it's good to pick up on a certain technique. Sometimes I'll go on YouTube videos in order to look at a quick Adobe After Effects technique, but it's not the same as learning in a curriculum on a weekly basis with homeworks and someone giving you feedback, especially that, because you can make all the videos you want and you can throw them on YouTube, but you're not going to get constructive criticism. You're just going to be like, that was dog shit, or yes, queen. Yeah, so that is so valid to me, is if you want to go to film school just to learn the basics. It's especially applicable if you want to do something like cinematography or lighting, especially with editing. A lot of the industry uses Avid, which sucks dick. Worst fucking thing ever. But you have to learn it. And there are no YouTube videos on how to use Avid. At least there are no good YouTube videos on how to use Avid, because it's so industry used and it's so rarely used by the common folk. You're just not going to find shit on how to use Avid. So if you're into editing and your goal is to become an editor, good luck finding shit about how to edit on Avid. And if you say, oh, I don't need Avid, I know how to use DaVinci or Adobe, well, you need Avid. It's not your decision, it's the company you work for, unfortunately. Alright, next. Some teachers are good, some teachers are not so good. That's a pro and a con. Sometimes you'll get a teacher that's really into what they do and will teach you everything and will be like, here's a bunch of equipment, go fucking nuts, yada yada yada. And sometimes you have a teacher who's just really disorganized. Here's like a trend I noticed with film teachers, and again, I used to study pharmacy, and just pharmacy compared to film. I feel like a lot of teachers just talk without saying anything. I just get that vibe a lot, where they just say a bunch of stuff and it doesn't mean anything, and all of a sudden we're on like 15 tangents and it's not relevant. Part of that is also because my school has like big classes that last long versus like quick classes that are 1 hour, so you have to say what you have to say and get the fuck out. But sometimes I'll have a teacher just ramble. One teacher, I can't believe I'm saying this. One teacher actually said this. This was for like a writing class. Deafness is an identity, not a disease. We should stop treating it as such, and we should learn American Sign Language instead of giving hearing aids to people. So you get some dumb shit. And here's the best advice I can give you. If there's a class that's not helpful, half-ass it. Don't put like pressure on yourself to do well in a class that has zero purpose. If there's a class that's worth it, if you're an editor and you like editing, and you know for a fact you don't want to do writing and you're forced to take a writing class, don't force yourself. Get a C. If that means you can get opportunities elsewhere instead of showing up to that class, do it. Know your goals and go for it. You know? Me, I love writing, so I make sure I go to every writing class and see what I can learn. I like editing. I make sure I go to every editing and I can learn. But then there's sometimes these little film theory classes that I have zero interest in. I skip those. So know what your goals are and work accordingly. We'll talk more about that later. But yeah, sometimes the teachers are really good. They'll give you super good feedback. Like I have a teacher, you submit a video like as a project, and he'll actually go on the timeline and put comments on your timeline. This is what you did bad in this shot. This is what you did bad in this shot. And the best teachers are the ones that are hard asses. I love my teachers when they're hard asses. I don't like teachers when they're too soft on me and like, oh, good job. Teachers that are hard asses are amazing, so make sure you go for those. Big pro, you get to build a portfolio. Again, you have people around you. They have the same kind of objectives as you. They have to get this assignment out. You have people around you helping. And every time you do a video, that's something you can add to your portfolio. Then you apply for a job and you're like, hey, here's my portfolio. If you do something good, just show it. That's why you should always kind of force yourself, even if it's a shitty little exercise. kind of give it your 100% because you don't know when you're going to make something good. Building a portfolio is especially hard when you're not in school, I find, because just over the summer I'm trying to get stuff off the ground, and it's like I have friends but they're working, they got gigs here, they got gigs there, they have work, they have to pay bills, location doesn't work out, that's a big one. So like when everyone is on the same page and everyone has to make school their priority, then it's easier to build your portfolio, in my opinion, versus when if you're doing it on your own and you need someone to hold the boom mic. All of a sudden the day comes and you ask your brother, hey, is it cool if you hold the boom mic for me? And he's like, oh, sorry, I have work. Well, you're not going to tell him to miss work because he's giving you a favor. But at the same time, it's like, dude, come on. You're leaving me hanging here. Building a portfolio is actually, in my opinion, easier when you're in film school versus when you're out of film school. Just because when you're out of film school, you're asking people for favors, and you don't really have anything to give in return. But in film school, you're like, I'll give a bit of my time and you give me a bit of your time, and we'll like do that exchange. It makes a lot more sense to build a portfolio in school than outside of school. Big con, school doesn't prepare you for real life. That's a biggie. Working on a school project, filming stuff, is so different than working on a set. I work as a PA on the side, so sometimes I'll go to school, sometimes I'll work as a PA, sometimes I don't mind missing like a long period of time in school in order to PA on a set. Over the summer, before the strike happened, I had a lot of work working on sets in the art department. It doesn't really prepare you for how the hierarchy works, how to work on set, how to be efficient. And here's the big one too, no one gives a fuck about your certificate or your degree or whatever you got. You're doing it more to help yourself. If it makes you a better person at the job, that's great, but no one cares. It's not like in pharmacy, the previous career I had, you needed a degree in order to practice. It's not like you can just show up to a pharmacy and be a pharmacist. So that's another big negative. You don't really get that real life experience. When people say real life experience, listen, being a PA is not rocket science, okay? That said, it's like a skill you need. You need to learn to show up on time. You need to learn to be respectful. You need to learn what every person on set is doing, you know? You need to learn how to be professional. You need to learn to work with people collaboratively. And so much of film is so dependent on that people would rather those attributes over skill, because at the end of the day, skill can be taught, but character can't really be taught. So if you're young, instead of maybe becoming a PA right away, maybe you would want to go to school. Maybe give yourself that time to mature. Give yourself that time to learn to be more personable, work with people, be more collaborative. If you already think you have those qualities, school won't really teach you that. You can just go straight to the job and learn on the job, which is also a very normal thing to do. I've met a lot of people on sets, and it's about a 50-50 split. 50% went to film school, 50% didn't go to film school. But yeah, for the most part, school won't prepare you for like a real life work experience. Some schools will do placements. I'm not there yet. I just did 1 year, but from what I hear, it's super hard to get a placement unless you had prior work. So it's not really the school that's giving you the placement. It's like you've already made the connection and you're just using it for one of the credits in your class. I'm just going to talk about things to consider when choosing a school. These, like, I made a list when I chose, and I think it really paid off. These are things I considered. Number one, cost efficiency. Go to a school that's cost efficient. Again, in Canada, you have schools like Toronto Film School, Vancouver Film School. Those are really expensive schools. If you've got the money, go for it, I guess. No, I actually don't. You know what I mean. Just like be cautious with the amount of money you're spending, because you can take that money and just do your own shit with it. So yeah, be conscious with the money you're spending. I went to school, like I said, I didn't want to pay for the equipment when I rented it out, and I wanted to pay a relatively reasonably priced tuition. So keep that in mind. Cost efficiency was my number one priority. I wanted to learn a lot at the least amount of cost possible. Number two, location. I wanted to live in a place where I went to school. This is maybe a topic for another video, but when I chose my school, I pictured myself living in Toronto. Certain things happened which made me re-question that idea, but that's a topic for a different time. But if you're going to school in the area you want to work and want to settle down, it makes it really easy because A, your university probably has a reputation for better or for worse. I know my school, when I go on set and I say I go to this school, a lot of people are like, oh, we love students from that school, which is great. But if I were to take my school and then work in Quebec, which is what I did, no one knows my school, and people give even less of a fuck. If there was less of a fuck than the don't give a fuck what school you go to, that was them. And also, if you can go to school while working as a PA, find jobs that you can work on the weekends, or even if you want to take a week off school just to work as a PA, I've done that a few times as well. Or I had a really good job where like someone was like, hey, we'll pay you, just hold the boom microphone for this small production. And I did it. Like sometimes you can get those opportunities if you're living in the city that you're going to school in and working in. And then when you get out of school, you already have those connections in order to pursue them. So really look at what city do I want to live in. Now in Canada, the 3 big film cities are Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. Those are like the 3 big ones. Maybe there's some film shit going on in Ottawa. I hear Calgary is on the come up. I don't know. I don't care. I just looked at those 3. And what's really turning me off about Toronto right now is the cost of rent. Versus in Montreal, rent is very affordable. And like I said, I went from a really tiny town in Bangor, Maine. And before that, I was in a small city in Quebec. And I jumped ship to Toronto. I'm really getting this fucking culture shock. Like, I've never seen so many people packed into a city. And I don't even live in Toronto. I live in like a GTA area. But yeah, I'm kind of getting that culture shock. So I might consider going back home. But try going to a school that's within the area you want to go to. Don't go to LA just to not work in LA. Because no one is going to give a fuck about UCLA somewhere else. Like, go to LA if you want to live in LA, if you want to work in LA. I don't know what the fuck is going through your head if you want to work in LA and live in LA. There's probably some brain worms in your fucking brain. But yeah. Third priority we talked about a lot is access to equipment. Like I said, some schools would charge you every time you rent a piece of equipment out. I didn't want that shit. And I also wanted a big variety of equipment. I wanted to fuck around with lights, cameras, sound equipment, editing supplies. One thing my school doesn't have that I wish they had was more tactile film. Stuff like Super 8 cameras and Super 16 cameras and 35mm cameras and maybe an editing room to splice that all together. But at the end of the day, the industry just isn't there anymore. It's a thing of the past. Here's what I would say if you want to get into that is don't choose a school based on that. But you can still do that on the side. Like I said, there's this thing called Lift Toronto, or Liaison of Independent Filmmakers Toronto. And they have all that shit. They sell Kodak film. They sell old film cameras. You can rent them for the day. You can use their supplies in order to edit, or in order to splice it together, glue it together, all that good shit, develop it. You can do it there. It's not an integral part of your education unless you want to do maybe cinematography and you want to learn that. But again, it's something you can kind of learn on the side it's going to cost you a lot, but if you're really that into learning it, just learn it. Another thing that I considered, I wanted very little theory and very high hands-on. A lot of film schools, especially those that give you a bachelor or give you a master's, they will pat that out with a lot of English classes. Because my program, I just get a certificate. But there's some programs where you get a bachelor's of arts in film studies or a master's of arts in film studies. That should be the lowest of lows of your priorities, is getting that piece of paper. Again, like I said, when you go to a film set, whether you have a master's, A bachelor's, a certificate of completion, nobody cares. That should be the lowest of your priorities. And when you take a bachelor's, or you take a master's, or you go to a big university that's more renowned for its kind of more university style versus more trade kind of schools, when you go to those kinds of institutions, you're going to get a lot of filler. What is filler? Classes like English. You do not need English in order to do film. Classes like film theory. You can watch movies on your own time. You do not need to write essays about them. You can do what I do. Just start a YouTube channel and hopefully you get paid for it. Classes like, I don't know, Marxism in film, feminism in film, international film. Try to avoid taking those classes because they take time. You're going to be spending 3 hours a week in a class taking this. You're going to be doing assignments for this class. Just shit like that gets in the way. Avoid it. Maybe if you're a student and you're young and you're 18 and you have time on your hands, go for it. I don't know. I get more the hands-on shit. Look at what schools have more hands-on. I know the schools in Toronto that do more hands-on. I know the schools in Toronto that are more theory-based. I avoided the theory. I did not need the theory, and I just did the hands-on. And you know what? I have a friend that goes to University of Toronto. Sometimes he lets me sneak into his classes. He goes to U of T. It's a very prestigious university, very renowned, has a really good film theory program. Nothing's stopping me from just going when my friend goes, eavesdropping, and leaving. And then I don't have to do an assignment, and I get all the theory. So yeah, you can do that. You just need to know someone in a university that's willing to fucking sneak you in. And lastly, you can look at the output of film the university does. If you just go on YouTube, do some investigation. What is a graduate level film at this university? What is a graduate level film at this university? Usually the schools that have the better looking video, it's reflective of better education, and schools where the graduate project is maybe a little lackluster is reflective that maybe they should have had more hands-on practice. So you can do that on your own time. Just go on YouTube, graduate level film, XYZ university that you want to go to, and fucking do that. Here's the last thing I'll say. It's such a debate. Should I go to school or should I just work? You can do both. You can do both. It's not an either or. This isn't fucking Sophie's Choice. Okay? You can just do both. Nothing's stopping you. You can go to class. This class, not very helpful to me. You know what? I'm just gonna fucking pass it with a 60. Whatever. And I'm gonna take that time I would have spent on that class, maybe work on set, find a job. You can work at places like commercial companies that are looking to hire. You can find jobs through Facebook. You can just do stuff like that. Just work on the side. During the summer, you have plenty of time to find a job and work. Yeah, and you're gonna make friends that probably can get you a job if you don't have that kind of network. Maybe. I don't know if your friends are cool. But yeah, it's not an either or. Like, I did school while working as a PA. Because in Toronto, there's so many non-union projects that are like, okay, we're going to film during weekends. And even if I did work on a union set while I was in school, and I just missed class for like 2 weeks, and then made sure I caught up in the following week. So it's not that out of the ordinary, okay? You can do both. It's not a debate. Should I go to film school or should I just work? You can do both. Just because you're going to school doesn't mean you're going to miss out on all the good opportunities that comes with learning on the job. Just fucking do both. You should be doing both. I'm telling you, I'm looking at you. Do both, okay? Don't do one or the other. Do both. Unless you can't afford school, which is a different story, or if school is very cost prohibitive for you. Then you should consider maybe not going to school and just learning at the job. But just because you're going to school, you shouldn't just be picking your ass and being like, well, this degree is going to get me somewhere. It's not. It's a good tool to learn, but you should also be learning through other avenues, like learning on the job. Huh? Jesus. I'll see you guys around. Take care.